Welcome to Breaking Friction. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're about to completely dismantle the way you think about studying. If you've ever felt like you're literally fighting your own brain just to retain information, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to tear down those outdated, brute force study habits and rebuild your entire approach using a totally science-backed framework. We're talking about the architecture of accelerated learning. So let's dive right in.
It's the ultimate frustration, isn't it? You pour hours and hours of your life into reading, highlighting, and repeating information, only to experience a massive drop in retention by the time you wake up the next day. The core reason behind that frustration is this concept called learning debt. Learning debt happens when we take in new, complex information without actually taking the time to digest it and make it relevant. We kind of just defer the hard work for later. And because it stays irrelevant, our brain simply tosses it in the trash, forcing us to relearn the whole shebang all over again.
So to stop accumulating all this learning debt, we really have to understand the boundaries of our mind. And that brings us to cognitive load theory. Think of your working memory like a tiny funnel. It has a strict biological limit on what it can actually process at any one time. When we try to cram massive amounts of disorganized, raw data through that funnel, we trigger cognitive overload. And the result? A rapid decay of knowledge. We aren't failing because we aren't smart enough. Actually, scratch that. We're failing because we are actively fighting the natural limitations of our working memory.
Here is our roadmap to get out of that cognitive overload. We're going to cover the learning illusion, Pillar 1, self-management, Pillar 2, encoding information, Pillar 3, smart retrieval, and finally, mastering complex skills.
Starting with Section 1, the learning illusion, busting the myth of brute force memorization. You see, there's this Trojan horse truth about rote memorization. Relying purely on repetitive testing leads to massive diminishing returns. Now, you might see a high initial gain if you go from using absolutely zero study techniques to just running through some basic flashcards. But over time, you end up putting in huge amounts of effort just to hold on to the facts, constantly fighting a really steep forgetting curve. Things like spaced repetition and active recall are meant to be a safety net, not your primary starting engine for learning. To fix this, we have to navigate the three types of cognitive load. First is intrinsic load, which is just the natural difficulty of the topic. I mean, aerospace engineering is just inherently harder than basic math, right? Then there's extraneous load. This is the unnecessary mental friction caused by messy notes, poor instructions, or, just distractions. And germane load, well, that's the holy grail. That is the actual meaningful mental processing, where you connect ideas and build long-term memory schemas. So our absolute main goal is this. We want to eliminate the extraneous, manage the intrinsic, and completely optimize the germane. Moving right along to Pillar 1, self-management, defending your working memory. One of the absolute best ways to eliminate that extraneous load we just talked about is the Pomodoro technique, created by Francesco Cirillo. Super simple. You pick a single task, you set a timer for 25 minutes of indivisible focus. And I mean indivisible. If you get interrupted, the Pomodoro technically fails and you got to restart it. Then you take a 5-minute break to let the brain transition. This works so well because, honestly, your brain just isn't designed for marathon 3-hour cram sessions. These planned breaks prevent burnout and actually help you hit a cognitive flow state way more consistently. And this really sums it all up. Self-management is the shield that protects your working memory from extraneous load. Without things like focus enablers, time blocking, and eliminating all those internal and external interruptions, the next pillar, which is where the actual learning happens, is practically impossible. You absolutely have to secure the perimeter first. Which brings us to Pillar 2, encoding information, the heavy lifting of true understanding. There is a really sharp contrast between the illusion of productivity and actual genuine learning. Transcribing linear notes exactly as a lecturer speaks, that just offloads your cognitive load onto the paper. It feels incredibly productive, but it actually results in a super high forgetting rate. Relational encoding, on the other hand, connects new concepts to your existing knowledge, basically building a mental schema. When you organize information logically before you even try to memorize it, you create a remarkably flat forgetting curve. It's a real game changer.
So how do we actually do this relational encoding? Well, we use these 4 core tactics. First, you simplify. You got to stop trying to memorize jargon and just strip it down to its core meaning. Second, compare. Ask yourself, how is this new concept similar to or different from something I already know? Third, connect. Map out exactly how these ideas influence one another. And finally, group. Take a messy, tangled web of concepts and organize them by shared similarities. That literally cuts the feeling of overwhelm right in half.
Now to test if you've actually encoded something, or if you're kind of just faking it, you'll want to use the Feynman technique. First, learn the concept. Second, try to teach it simply to a complete novice without using any of your notes. When you inevitably stumble or get stuck, that brings us to step 3. You've just identified a gap in your encoding. So go back, fill the gap, simplify the explanation, and archive it. This is literally the ultimate litmus test to make sure you've truly comprehended the material rather than just memorizing fancy terminology. To really force your brain into this high-efficiency encoding, you can use the GRIND framework for mind mapping. That stands for group, relational, insightful, nonverbal, and directional. By heavily relying on spatial arrangements, arrows, and visual structures instead of just writing out long, wordy sentences, you force your brain to engage in high-level evaluation and analysis right there on the page. Let's look at Pillar 3, Smart Retrieval, the safety net for encoded knowledge. To use this retrieval safety net effectively, you should apply the flashcard triage strategy. Here's how it works. If you get a card correct 3 times in a row, you merge and upgrade it. You challenge yourself to make higher-level connections rather than just sticking to basic recall. But if you get it incorrect 3 times in a row, you flag it for a targeted review. That repeated failure is telling you loud and clear that you have an encoding gap. So you shouldn't just keep mindlessly swiping. You need to pause, go back, and completely rebuild the foundation for that concept.
Finally, mastering complex skills, avoiding theory overload.
Now, when we shift from acquiring academic knowledge to mastering lifelong skills, there's a massive trap that almost everyone falls into. We call it theory overload. When you consume endless tutorials, books, and courses way faster than your brain can actually form habits through practice, you experience a near 100% failure rate in skill acquisition. Optimum skill growth only happens when you tightly balance the amount of theory you take in with deep, varied, experiential practice. You have to execute, fail, observe the result, and then adjust. To guide you through those really frustrating early stages of learning a skill, what we call the latent learning period, you can use the RAIL framework. First up is relevance, discovering what variables actually matter. Second is awareness, making tons of mistakes and actively identifying them so you can break through the plateau. Third is iteration, using varied practice in different contexts to build speed and consistency. And lastly, lifelong, maintaining the skill through regular use so you don't suffer from skill decay. Before we start wrapping things up, I really want you to remember this number, 10. Taking just 10 minutes to prep and build a mental scaffold before a learning session or a meeting can literally save you hours of frustration later. A quick preview of the material allows your brain to create these little structural cups so that when the dense information flows in, it actually has somewhere logical to go. It is absolutely crucial.
I think this quote encapsulates absolutely everything we've talked about today. What goes into your brain is less important than what stays in your brain. We really have to shift away from this mindless consumption of reading and rereading and move towards the intentional digestion of simplifying, connecting, and actively encoding the material.
So I leave you with this question to chew on. Are you ready to stop fighting your brain and start building your pillars? I highly encourage you to take a hard look at your own learning system. Start applying self-management today, embrace the discomfort of encoding tomorrow, and use Smart Retrieval as your ultimate safety net. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.